Good evening, guys. Thanks for having me. It's a blessing to be here. Again, my name's Gino, like Joseph said, and my wife and I started going to this church in 1988. And we were here for about 18 years, and we moved to the High Desert, and we go to Calvary Chapel High Desert now. We met a lot of people here that we still consider family today. And every now and then I get the opportunity, the blessing, the privilege just to come up and hang out with you guys, so thanks for having me. I spoke here a couple years ago at a men's breakfast, I believe. Can I see how many people were not here when I spoke? So nobody was there. Okay, so I'll just give you a quick rundown, okay? This is going to be a story of God's goodness. It's going to be a story of just like the prodigal son in real time. It's going to be a story of how God is still working today as he did in the past. So the last time I spoke on how God used a man to preach to the hippies back in the day, and of course that was Chuck Smith. I was watching the movie, The Jesus Revolution, and at least in Chuck's experience, the established church that he was in was rejecting these people. And the Lord put it on his heart to reach out to these people, the hippies, the acid droppers, the free sex people, the Woodstock people. And you see what the Lord did with that. One of the biggest church things in the history of our country, Calvary Chapel movement. If you haven't seen the movie Jesus Revolution, it's great. It also covers the history of the church coming up under Chuck and some of the things that went on. It's entertaining and also educational. And it was very inspiring to me because at that point that I came up to teach and share how the possibility, who are those groups of people today that our church rejects, is what I talked about back then. And I believe in my personal life, it was the LGBTQ, gay, trans, alphabet, whatever it is, group that we all get, maybe not all of us, but I was offended. I hated it. But God softened my heart. Look what I did with Chuck for the hippies. I'm no Chuck, of course. But in my heart, I think God wanted me to have that same attitude. And I was going through something in my life at the time that I didn't share because it was right in the middle of what I was going through. And I'm going to share that with you now. And then I'm going to share another story at the end that's just incredible, what God has done with this person that's in my life. We have 4 children. Kaylee, the oldest, she's married to Daniel Etter. They serve at Calvary High Desert. He's an associate pastor. Jacob is a firefighter paramedic living in Washington. Him and his wife are expecting their first baby in 2 months, and they're going to be moving back here. And if I had a picture to put up here, I would say if you saw the picture, grab him and bring him in here. He's a believer, and I just want him to get in here and get planted and get a church family going as they start their own family, because this church family was very beneficial to my wife and I as we started our own family as well. God used the people in this church tremendously. Some of them are still here. So, my oldest, and then I have a third child, Julia. She's 23. And I have a fourth child, Colby, and he's 14. He was the whoops child. And he's here today getting tacos with all of us. Just to fast forward to the story of how God used the message of that movie in my life. At about the age of 15, my wife and I noticed that our third child, our daughter, was having attitude around the house, anger issues, isolation. We noticed that her appearance began to change, and we knew something was up. So we prayed and prayed, Lord, what's going on with our girl, And Mom ended up finding a tablet that she was using to do writing. I didn't allow my kids open internet, and I still don't until they're adults. And we educate them on the dangers of that. But, kids are smart these days, and somehow she figured out that password. And she had gotten into some of these message boards and groups with some undesirable people. And I think that planted a seed that drew her in that direction. Over the next few years, we worked with her, prayed with her. She went to counseling. But still kind of hard-hearted at the time, kind of hard to deal with. So several years later, we discovered that she had been secretly identifying as a homosexual. And we were dealing with this when I was here last. And again, God used that message to right my heart and my attitude towards how I'm going to parent her through this, as Joe had mentioned. The changes in the clothing, the hairstyles were subtle, but as the time went on, we began to really worry. We were unaware also that she had a few friends who also encouraged and identified as such. We were horrified, you know. Our kids were raised in a church. They were homeschooled. We worshiped with them. We read the Bible to them. We're like perfect parents. And we're super humble, too. So, of course, we're not perfect, but I knew our hearts were right. And I think the Lord honored that our hearts were right, even in our imperfection. We really tried and strived very hard to be the best parents we could in terms of what the Bible advises us to be. I firmly believe that even in a non-perfect parenting environment, if the parents are following the Lord, even in their imperfection, God can honor that because their intent and their heart is right. I've seen it in many, many examples of families, and maybe you have too. You see a married couple and go, look at those weirdos, but their kids are awesome. And it's because they believe in the Lord, they follow the Lord, they teach their Lord to their kids, they bring them to church. So we sat down with our angry daughter. We made it clear that we loved her. Nothing could change that. There's nothing she could have done or said that would change the fact that we loved her. But the truth is the truth. And this lifestyle is a direct rebellion to God's plan for humanity and purpose for your life. And I have to answer to that, God, if there's sin in the camp. And there's going to be a day I'm going to have to do it. I was conflicted. And we just told her, if you continue to pursue this, we're not kicking you out, but you can't live here and pursue that lifestyle. And her response was, I don't want to live here anymore. That was rough. That was rough for me and Mom. And at the time I felt like, we have to let her go and trust the Lord with her. This was so tough for us. So she made plans to drive across the country. She was going to go live in Virginia. We made it clear to her that we do not support her decision, but we will try to ensure her safety on the way. I warned her, if you're cruising along, it was a fine balance. Again, we're not condoning and supporting, but we're trying to be a safety net so that God can work in her life. I felt like at the time our voices were just clanging cymbals. And what she needed to hear was God's voice in her life. And I didn't want to get in the way of that. So she drove across the country. Again, Mom and I horrified of the dangers of that. But she made it all the way there and moved in with a friend of hers that was actually going to a Christian college at the time. We thank the Lord for that. She got a job. She got settled in. She called on occasion. It was awkward. It was very awkward. And we just kept praying that the Lord would put people in her life that she admired and respected, but loved Him. We prayed that God would show her the emptiness of the lifestyle she was pursuing. She was pursuing more so than anything, just the rebellious attitude and the image, the coolness, the more than any relationships. We were in constant prayer with the family and subtly always letting her know that we loved her. I knew that our family's interaction with her, brothers and sisters, me and Mom, was crucial. We didn't want to feed a fire of resentment, so we were why she was doing what she was doing. We warned her that she's going to meet people that are going to tell her they don't love you for who you are. We told her we do love you for who you are, and God loves you for who you are, a sinner. So during her 11 months out in Virginia, I planned a couple vacations. And I wanted to give her an opportunity to come back into the fold and experience a real love from us. Hoping, maybe a little manipulative, hoping that the world was not treating her nice. And we brought her up to Seattle. We all gathered up there, spent a week together, and we were going to put her on a plane at 5 a.m. And we were going on separate planes after. And we were hugging her, and everyone was crying. And she said, I didn't realize it was going to be this hard to leave. And that was really tough, man. She got on the plane, she left. Me, Mom, and Colby went back to the Airbnb just in tears. And I said, you know what? Her heart's still with us. You guys, we got to keep praying, right? God can work this. We got to keep praying. The second one was a few months later. She had gotten sick in April. She was prescribed a medication that she was allergic to. It went into almost like an anaphylactic shock kind of thing where she swelled up, couldn't breathe. She was admitted in the hospital for several days. It was a very traumatic experience for her. I was this close to pushing the airline ticket button, several nights in a row as we're getting updates. She came out of that and everything was fine. Thank the Lord for that. The last vacation was going to be a family gathering in Yosemite, so we all went up there, and as a family we agreed, look, we're not going to condemn her, we're not going to talk about the sin and the rebellion, we're going to love her, and God is going to use that and work through that to her. And that's what we did. All her brothers, her sister, and the grandbabies, and Mom and I. Well, there came a point where during the 11 months, the hospital experience, she was out of money. She was losing her apartment, in and out of a couple jobs, and she was missing her family. And she hit rock bottom. And I told her during her experience, I normally silence my phone when I go to bed, so you can call me anytime, tell me you got a flat tire or whatever, and I'll be sleeping, and I'll get it in the morning. Well, I told her, I'm going to leave my ringer on the whole time you're not under my roof. Well, she did call one night. Not that late. It was early evening. I'm on the couch. And she said, excuse me, you guys. She said, I'm so sorry. I've embarrassed you. I've embarrassed people at our church. I've embarrassed other families. She was a wreck, an absolute wreck. She said, I want to come home. And she recommitted her life to Jesus on the phone that night. That was a really good night for me. There have been many years of manipulation and behavior that would test if her intention was genuine or not, and we were cautious. And my older brother got a hold of me as I was sharing my concern with him, like, I'm cautious, like maybe she's faking us out, because, sometimes we love her so much, you want to overlook some of those things, but I wanted to be wise. I wanted to make sure it was a genuine transformation. So my brother shared this with me. This is Jesus speaking about the parable of the prodigal son. So let me read right here in verse 11. This is, I have my notes are jacked up. Okay, I'll start reading. This is Jesus speaking. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided the property between them, and not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him into the field to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. This is the verse that got me. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I'll set out and go back home to my father, and I'll say to him, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your servants. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming in the distance, and he ran to him, and he kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger, put sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and let's kill it. Let's feast and celebrate, for his son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he's found. So they began to celebrate. So my struggle, the prodigal son was out of money, he was hungry, he was alone, he was feeling desperate too. But in Luke 15:17, when he said, but when he came to his senses, Sometimes the Lord uses our physical attention in order to perform a spiritual intervention. And I believed at that moment my daughter was genuine. She had hit rock bottom, just like his son. Have you ever experienced that in your life? If you've been a Christian long enough, I bet you have. Somebody that you know, maybe yourself. God can allow the hardship in our lives to provoke us to come to our senses. And for this, I'm eternally grateful. So during that call where she recommitted her life to Jesus and we went back and began a plan for her to come home. And instead of her driving across the country by herself this time, we all flew out there. We ran to her. We didn't see her in the distance, but we ran to her, and we all drove back together. That was August 2023. That's an example of God's faithfulness. That's an example of that story in the Bible that's true, being lived out in today's time. God is still bringing people from death to life. Do you have a wayward kid? Keep praying. Do you have a wayward relative, a wayward spouse, a wayward neighbor? Keep praying. Are they still alive? Keep praying. Mom and I would pray things like what I shared about putting people in her life, that she would be sweetly convicted, show her the emptiness, and God was faithful, and he did that and brought her home. Is it a guarantee that they'll repent? Of course not. But if you never stop praying, at least Jesus will be with you through it. In 1 Samuel 12:23, Samuel's commitment to praying for the Israelites and teaching them what is good and right states, Samuel says this, "Far be it from me that I would sin, ceasing to pray for you and instruct you in the good and the right way." So just like God told Chuck to minister to the hippies and love them, God used that movie to tell me to do the same thing towards my daughter, and he was 100% faithful. He's still bringing prodigals home, whether it's a group of hippies or one child. So I just want to encourage you guys, if you know anybody like this, anybody that comes to your mind when you're praying, pray for them. God is good, amen? So we'll fast forward. Julia's still walking and serving the Lord to this day. And the story I'm about to share with you now is what I shared with Pastor Joseph in the church of the post office a couple months ago. And he said, "I want you to come share that story." He didn't know I was going to bring in the rest of the story from last time. Julia came home and she got involved in our Africa missions team and went to Africa last year in 2024. The team does medical treatments, construction, teaching. They bring school supplies, medicine, clothing. They just serve and love those people. She brought back pictures and videos that just melted my heart. She returned a much deeper person. The fruits of the Spirit were becoming more and more evident in her life. God had answered our prayers. He did put people in her life that love him, and she became friends with. So she signed up again for 2025 this year. The team set out on June 15th, this June. It always takes a long time to get there where they're going. They're going up into the top of the Congo. It's usually 2 planes, a bus, and a boat, 3 to 4 days till they even get to the village that they serve in. And there's always interruptions, whether they're at the border and they're not believed to be legit missionaries, or something breaks down and they're stuck on the side of the road. There's no Ubers over there. So it's always complicated getting there, but they just endure it and they go. We've been doing it at our church now like 19, 20 years. So Friday the 20th, they're going to take a boat ride. They had to go a different direction. They have to go across this lake called Lake Tanganyika. It's the second largest freshwater lake in the world. 12,000 square miles surface area. It's like a mile deep in the middle. And normally they take a smaller boat ride. And it's pretty common that they get into these wooden boats and they're bailing water the whole way, and there's storms come, and they have to pull off to the side and wait for the storm and the waves to go away. It's a challenge to get to those villages. So this time they're going to go a different way because there's some political unrest in one of the towns they would have had to go through. They were going to take a much longer trip, a 44-mile boat ride out of a different town. But the boat was a fiberglass boat. It was not very large, probably looked to me about 25 feet or so for a team of 12, and 4 natives, like captain and shipmates, those guys. But it looked sturdy. So it had to get worked on. They were delayed for a few days there, but they ended up getting on the boat Friday the 20th. And the boat was going through some repairs, and during this time, the family members are getting updates from people. In this case, it was my older daughter who was receiving texts because their phones work intermittently. Sometimes one person's phone will work, sometimes the other one won't. And at 10 a.m., as I was headed up to work, I got an update from Daniel, my son-in-law. He said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that they're about 4 miles out in the lake and the boat broke. And it's 8 p.m. up there." All right, it's not the worst news, right? So I called my wife. I said, "Hey, I guess the boat broke. They're in the water." And in my mind, I'm thinking, it's not Huntington Beach, Newport Beach. They're going to spend the night. Someone's going to come get them in the morning. It'll delay them again. So after working, I get back home, and Mom and I are sitting on the couch, and my wife starts getting these weird messages about the boat taking on water, but we didn't think much of it because we've heard of that happening before. So my wife called our oldest daughter, who had been relaying messages to us, and she had just found out what really happened at 10 o'clock our time, 8 p.m. their time. The boat sank 3 or 4 miles out. So here we are 7, 8 hours later thinking the boat broke, but it sank. Everyone's in the water, and I'm sitting on my couch like, my daughter's been swimming in this lake for 8 hours. It's now 2 and 3 in the morning. It was a rough one. My wife and I immediately texted a group text with Joey Webb, Mike Marquardt, and Jeremy King and said, "Hey, you guys, this is the worst case scenario. Can you please pray for me?" Thank you, guys. They were very encouraging. I know they prayed for us. Mom and I spun out for about 30 minutes, of course, praying and hoping and waiting for any news. We gathered our entire family on the phone. And I remember one of the things I said was, "Lord, you brought her home once. Please bring her home again." Like a dummy, I sat there and I searched boat sinking Lake Tanganyika, and the headlines I were reading were 129 dead in ferry sinking, ship sinks killing 100, 10 people missing in Lake Tanganyika, 11 dead in boat sinking, and on and on and on. That's all I read. I'm looking at my wife like, they're not coming back. Then I searched the animal life. Nile crocodiles, hippos, water cobras, these huge dinosaur fish with these big dinosaur teeth, jellyfish. Plus there's parasites, there's bacteria, all kinds of stuff in that thing. We had found out after about 30 minutes of being in complete despair that the day before, our pastors from our church, our head pastor, mission pastor, his watch had died, and he was frustrated. And this gentleman named Josue said, "Hey, man, you take my G-Shock here. I got this watch in my suitcase. It's an Apple Watch. I'll put it on." He wasn't going to wear it. He didn't want to get it wet and stuff. He wasn't going to wear it till they got to the village. As the boat's sinking, Jose was able to hit SOS on his watch. That went to his wife back in Victorville. He told her, "If you get an SOS, open up this folder." And there it was, contact church leadership, contact the embassy in Tanzania, and start recovery, start rescue stuff. Well, it was 8 o'clock at night, so the embassy's closed. She ends up talking to a cop on his cell phone on the street. He's walking the street, and she's telling him the story. He's like, "Look, the embassy's going to open. I'll go there. I'll make sure you get in contact." And the Lord worked that out. The question my wife and I had was, did they have life vests? Because they hadn't had life vests before. They've never had a problem. Thankfully, when we talked to Josue's wife, she said, yes, they all had life vests because they waited 2 hours before, knowing it was a longer trip. Somebody in the group, I don't know who, said, "We're not getting on without life vests. We're traveling across 44 miles overnight." So the boat captain, I think I heard, was frustrated because he wanted to get underway. It was getting dark, 6 or 7 o'clock, but they had life vests. And I'm like, my Juju grew up in a pool, man. She was diving to 8 feet when she was 6 years old, she won't give up. And she's stubborn. I know she's stubborn. She showed me she's stubborn. Lord, use it in a good way. During the night, they became separated. My daughter was in a group of 7 from our church. The 4 natives could not swim. They only know when you go in the lake, you die. You know, our group didn't know that. They just know you go in the lake, you swim around. So these natives were panicking, and they don't know how to swim. They just know if you sink, you die. So they were holding up the group. So the head pastor, Brian, who had known these guys for 20 some odd years, some of these guys best friends with him because he's the one that always goes to Africa and works with these people. There were 4 men and 3 women in their group. I know there was 7 with my daughter. I know there was at least 4 guys. He said, you guys go for shore. And I'm going to try to get these guys to shore. They don't know how to swim, but we got like a couple life vests and 1 ring here. Well, there was only enough life vests for 11. So the group of 7 had them, and then Pastor Brian and his 3 had them. One of them was missing a life vest. My math might be wrong, but because I'm just a tire guy. One of them was missing a life vest. It was the captain of the boat, and he became separated. So in the middle of the night, the thought was that he had drowned as they were trying to get to shore. So some hours later, the mood of the people in the water from our church, they were singing worship songs. They were talking and joking, and they had a lot of faith. Like, immediately I'm thinking, we're dying. To hear the stories that my daughter's told me and seen some of these pictures, they had joy on their faces. My daughter told me as the boat was sinking, she's singing with one of the ladies, you call me out upon the waters. You know, it was a serious situation, but the Lord, I believe, was carrying them through it. So in the middle of the night, I have to back and tell you a story. A week before she went to Africa, we had a fire at our house. And she already had her Africa suitcase packed with all of her medical information, passports and things. And my wife said, I'm going to put this in the car in case our house burns down, but there's a hole in this thing. And I'm like, it's going to Africa. You know, it's going to get kicked around by elephants. You know, Julia doesn't care. So she left. I stayed. Fire did nothing. Mom comes home, and I felt guilty because I'm thinking, I don't want to spend any money on a suitcase. So we decide, Mom, go get her suitcase. So she gets her a hard case Samsonite suitcase. In the middle of the night now, fast forward back on the lake, it's dark. They hear something coming in the distance, you know, and here comes the guy they thought that drowned, riding on my daughter's suitcase, trying to get back to the group. The suitcase had 12 hydration packs, 12 some type of power granola bar, nutrient bar. There's a lighter in there, clothes in there. So they kept that, because we might need this if we make shore in the middle of the night. The watch and the suitcase, to me, God, that's like your signature, right? That's like, even in mass chaos, when death is imminent, you're just signing right here. I'm just going to save you with this watch right here. I'm going to save you with this suitcase. The 7 stayed very positive throughout the night, singing, talking. There was an issue with one of the younger guys who's 0 body fat. I would have been fine. He was 0 body fat, so he was hypothermic. He hallucinated a little bit. At one point, my daughter told me that she had to slap him in the head to get him to speak correctly because he was saying words backwards or something, and it ended up being okay with him. He did end up coming out of it. When the sun came up, they were still positive. They started taking pictures of the sunrise and stuff, but as the morning wore on, Julia and Josue, the gentleman with the Apple Watch, had now had her suitcase, and they were leading the group. By this time, it had been 16 hours, and the people were stretched pretty far back, and they're yelling back and forth, are you still back there? And at one point, my daughter looks over, and Josue is not a small guy. He's a big dude, and he's swimming, and she sees his head down in the water. And she gets his attention, and she notices that he's crying. And then she started crying, like giving up. And she reaches over, and she says, Josue, you got to get back to your kids, man. And that kind of supercharged them, and they kind of woke up a little bit, and she was trying to hide her face because she was telling me the sun was cooking their faces, and the water was 80 degrees all night, thank God. She looks up and she sees a little triangle on the water. And she's like, nah, I've been seeing boats all night. That's not a boat. No. So she put her head back down, looked back up, and the boat was right on top of them with a bunch of rescue guys. I know they had the Tanzanian Navy. I know they had they were right outside of a fishing village, private fishermen out there looking for them. The 7 were rescued at about the 16-hour mark. Brian had become separated from all the other guys, and it was feared that he was lost. At one point, a text came through to America that said 4 bodies found. That sent chills down everyone's spine. I guess in Africa, 4 bodies means people. Here, of course, we think of bodies as dead people. So that had to be corrected, and that was a relief. They're being rescued onto the boats. They couldn't move anymore. They completely atrophied their muscles. So they were my daughter told me it was kind of violent. They were like picking them up and throwing them up on the boat. But they got rescued after the 16 hours. The other 4 got rescued about an hour later. They all got rescued, praise God, right? All of the lessons that they had prepared to teach to the village applied to their direct experience. My daughter's message was, have faith like a mustard seed, Matthew chapter 17. Another one's message was about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel chapter 3. The other message was about Daniel in the lion's den, Daniel chapter 6. And when I heard that, and I remember hearing they were so joyous for a long time, I'm like, Lord, you're still jumping in dens. You're still jumping in furnaces, and you spent some time in Lake Tanganyika keeping these people hopeful. So after some medical treatment, 22-hour bus ride, 6-hour plane ride, another 14-hour plane ride. Took them exactly 7 days to get back to the parking lot where they left almost the same exact time a week before. They had to cancel the mission trip because everything they had went to the bottom of the lake except for the suitcase. A lot of people were sick. My daughter had typhoid, some ear infections and things like that, but they were all treated back here in the States and got better. And as I was coming home from work that Friday, that she was up in the air, I was coming up a dirt road to my house. And I decided to look at this app I have on my phone that can track airplanes. And I saw her airplane on my phone. And I look up, and her airplane was right there in the sky. I felt the Lord say, I brought her back again. And he did. And she's sitting right over there. So I just want to encourage you guys that God's still working very hard in this crazy world, sanctifying the saints, edifying his believers, healing broken relationships, bringing people back to their senses, and answering our prayers. Amen? Thanks for having me.